Hello and welcome to the Business Standard Morning Show. I'm Pranjal Sharma. Let's take a look at all the top stories of the day. Ford Motors has become the latest global car maker to stop production in India. This follows Harley-Davidson, which shut shop, as well as General Motors. Now, what does this mean? Does it mean that India has become a terrible investment destination for car makers? Or does it also say there is something big happening in the automotive sector globally, which means that some of these bigger companies are shrinking their global manufacturing bases? Let's take a look at this report.
US automobile major Ford Motor has pulled the plug on its production in India. And the decision has come after nearly 3 decades of the company's struggle to make a mark in India. Going ahead, it will sell only imported vehicles as part of a restructuring exercise. The writing was on the wall for several months, with the company reporting huge losses and poor sales in the past decade. Perhaps Ford in India was caught in the wrong lane both due to external and internal factors. The pandemic and subsequent divorce with M&M, even before the joint venture could take off, left the company with few options. So what does it mean for India and Indians? It means the automaker will stop selling vehicles like the EcoSport, Figo, Endeavour, Freestyle and Aspire, which were produced at the Chennai and Sanand plants. Let's look at some of the numbers that give a fair idea of what it means for Ford and the domestic market. Well, the concerning thing here is that Ford is the fourth US automaker to shrink India operations after Harley-Davidson, Motorcycle and General Motors in less than 5 years. The iconic Italian car brand Fiat ended the operations in India last year, and the reason it cited were almost similar in all cases: poor sales, high operating losses and high fixed costs. So does it mean that India as a market has failed to live up to global companies' expectations? And why do companies like Ford struggle when Maruti, Hyundai, Tata Motors and Mahindra, or for that matter even newcomers like Korean Kia and China's MG Motors, manage to get good numbers? Let's look at the possible reasons behind global auto players' exit from the India market. Global companies' bid to move from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles could be one of the reasons. And the existing trend underscores the pressures on global automakers to invest more in electric and automated vehicles as well as connected vehicle technology. Now, companies like Ford, General Motors and Renault are walking away from money-losing ventures and redirecting capital to electrification and investment in technology in order to survive. Now let's talk about the second reason, that is shared mobility. Sharing cars likely means lower growth of vehicle sales. There are several factors that have seen the rise in demand for shared mobility. The third important reason could be high ownership costs. India, which is the world's fifth largest market for passenger vehicles and the largest for two-wheelers, has seen growth in both segments tapering in the past decade, thanks to an increase in ownership costs. The compound annual growth rate for passenger vehicles dropped to 3.6% between FY10 and FY20, against 10.3% in the decade before this. Due to a global shortage of semiconductor chips, automakers from across the world are lowering production. And as a result, consumers will have to take the burden of paying more to buy these products. Maruti Suzuki chairman R.C. Bhargava recently pointed out the increase in car ownership cost was due to taxes and new regulations, and that definitely had an impact on car sales. So what is the need of the hour for a country like India? Well, the most sensitive issue for a developing country like India in this episode is the issue of massive job loss. There are 400 Ford outlets in India where dealers over time have invested 20 billion rupees. Such dealers will be at the biggest financial loss in their entire life. Think about those 4,000 odd permanent employees of Ford India and 40,000 employees at retail points. How will they survive? And this is just one instance. We might understand the extent of the crisis if we added the volume of impact in all such cases. It's time we thought about upskilling people to work in the new world of automobile industry, soon to be dominated by electric vehicles. In fact, the shortage of mechanics and technicians for EVs is already apparent. So is this not the time to turn a crisis into opportunity? Think about it.
It's been more than a month since the Income Tax Act was amended to do away with retrospective taxation, which had plagued the government of India as well as the Indian economy. Global investors are heaving a sigh of relief. Cairn Energy is about to end its dispute with India, but at the same time, the question is what happens to the other tax disputes between government and corporate world? This report takes a deeper look.
It has been almost a month after Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman decided to make amendments to the retrospective tax. The move was made in order to instill confidence among international businesses that India is still a great place to invest the money. If recent developments are anything to go by, it seems to have started showing results. Now let's first also understand retrospective tax regime and its implications. It allows the government to pass a law to tax certain transactions or deals that took place behind the date on which the law is passed. It gave the tax department power to go 50 years back and slap capital gains levies wherever ownership had changed hands overseas, but business assets were in India. The 2012 legislation was used to levy a cumulative of Rs 1.10 trillion of tax on 17 entities including Vodafone. Now let's get a sense of key amendments through this graphic. So the one major positive thing that has happened recently is the announcement by Cairn Energy that it is ready to settle its decade-long tax disputes with India. It also said it will return $700 million to shareholders through special dividends and buybacks, out of the expected tax refund of $1.06 billion from the government. An international arbitration tribunal scrutinizing the tax dispute in its verdict last year said that the tax demand was not valid. The tribunal even awarded $1.2 billion in damages to Cairn. Cairn had filed cases in France and the US to get its claim after getting a favorable ruling in international tribunals. In France, it secured a court's permission to freeze at least 20 Indian properties in Paris. So Cairn Energy could be the first among 17 cases to be resolved under the new arrangement. Apart from Cairn Energy, 16 other companies, including Vodafone Group, Vedanta, Mitsui, WNS Global, and New Singular Wireless faced tax demands under the retrospective tax that came into force on May 28, 2012. So what about other disputes and what is the status as of now? Vedanta, which had bought Cairn Energy's erstwhile subsidiary Cairn India in 2011, is likely to withdraw arbitration it had filed in Singapore, seeking around Rs 5,000 crore as damages from the government. Here is what a government official told Business Standard regarding Vedanta. Now let's talk about Vodafone. According to media reports, Vodafone is also open to settling tax row with India. The Indian government wants Vodafone to pay about Rs 22,100 crore in taxes, interest, and penalties. And as per the amendments, India will give up this demand if the company accepts not to seek any damages. Just to add, an international arbitration ruled against India's tax demand and also asked India to pay Rs 37 crore towards Vodafone's legal representation and other costs. Now there is a twist in the tale. It's not that all companies are looking for settlement as of now. Deva's multimedia shareholders have said that they will continue to pursue the implementation of the $1.3 billion arbitral award won against Antrix Corporation. Devas had won the arbitral award against Antrix Corporation, the commercial arm of the Indian Space Research Organisation or ISRO, in 2015. Though the Devas shareholders believed that the progress in the Cairn case was encouraging, but they insisted that the centre must pay all its debts. So it seems the government has made a start, or should we say a positive start. But the echo, or the impact of the retro tax, will remain there for some more time.
Mukesh Ambani's Reliance Industries is forging ahead in 3 new segments. It has acquired a majority stake in Strand Life Sciences. It has also entered into an agreement with Blue Smart for EV charging stations across the country. And later around Diwali, it is expected to have a partnership going with Google. Now, what does this mean for you if you are a Reliance shareholder? Take a look.
The market is likely to eye a movement in the stock of Reliance Industries this week, as lack of fresh triggers has kept indices range-bound over the past couple of days. RIL subsidiary Jio Platforms postponed the launch of India's cheapest smartphone, the JioPhone Next, last Friday. According to a Jefferies report, the smartphone is eyeing a market of nearly 540 million customers, which can lift Jio's revenues 10% by financial year 2022-23. But RIL investors will not have to wait that long to make a killing on their investments. The technical charts show that the stock has broken out of a year-long consolidation phase and market bulls are set to take it to an uncharted territory. Avdut Bakkar of Business Standard will break this down for you. Listen in.
After nearly a year, the shares of Reliance Industries have recorded a new all-time high, crossing 2369, which was its previous high. This positivity and momentum is likely to continue into the new bullish phase, and stock is likely to perform better. Whenever a stock hits a new all-time high, it indicates a bullish sign and market participants jump to take share of it. This sentiment is likely to take shares of Reliance Industry towards 2600 and 2900 levels in a short term. From a bigger perspective, the consolidation in the range of 2300 to 1800 level indicates a yearly breakout. This shows the momentum is strong, and the way price structure is evolving and the way market participants are contributing, there is no doubt that shares of Reliance Industry may even double in next 1 year. The likely target could be, the likely level could be 5,000.
Over the past 4 years, RIL has made investments of $4 billion across sectors like retail, energy, telecom, media, and internet. And every investment has been followed by a breakout rally. No wonder then that RIL's script is all set to repeat history. Well, while RIL's stock move could sway the markets on Monday, macroeconomic data and new listings would keep investors busy during the rest of the week. Among macro triggers, industrial production data and consumer and wholesale inflation prints will guide investor sentiment. In the primary markets, Amy Organics and Vijaya Diagnostics listing will be tracked by investors. Lastly, on the global front, the US inflation data will also affect international markets.
At a recent awards function of Business Standard, the chairman of the 15th Finance Commission, Mr. N.K. Singh, spoke about 3 critical challenges that India must tackle. These are institutional reforms, climate change, and geopolitical shifts. Let's listen in.
Reforming institutions, I wish to divide it into 3 parts. Parliament, the judiciary, the center-state relations. On Parliament and parliamentary reforms, I want to talk about reforming that institution. How do we make the standing committee and the consultative committees of Parliament more purposeful, engaging, and meaningful? In the past, the deliberations of the Parliamentary Standing Committee have been primarily engaged in scrutinizing legislation. In my view, to take these examinations and make them more purposeful, the standing committees need greater expert advice and domain knowledge. We need to develop this away from the concerned departments who are an interested party. Also, the concerned ministries need to recognize and consider the recommendations of the standing committee with greater care and diligence which they deserve. The financial committees of Parliament, namely the Public Accounts Committee, the Estimates Committee, and the Committee on Public Undertakings. The Public Accounts Committee is the oldest committee. In fact, it is older than our Constitution, and the most intrusive arm of parliamentary scrutiny in the working of the executive. I believe that the Public Accounts Committee in recent years has become completely dependent on the audit reports of the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. The PSC should therefore go beyond these findings. The CAG needs to act as a friend of the PSC, which it does, a sort of amicus curiae. The deliberations of the PSC need to serve broader objectives. Equally, the Estimates Committee can become more purposeful. I quickly move on now to judicial reforms, the ease of doing business, the speed and tardiness of the litigation process, the resolution of disputes, a mediation mindset than a litigative one, remembering that government is one of the principal litigants, needs deeper action. We need to seek greater cohesiveness between the legislative and the judicial action, fostering a more consensual, time-bound, and predictable arrangements to fill the backlog of vacancies in the senior judiciary. Inculcation of domain knowledge is of importance, specialization in areas of economic and social policy, on emerging concerns like illustrative on renewable energy, on fossil fuel pricing, and on environmental law. Alternative mechanisms for dispute resolution would be enormously beneficial. I will now talk a little bit about the center-state relations. This time, as you know, the terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission, which I had the privilege to chair, was rather unusual and somewhat broad-ranging, leaving aside some contentious issues like the date of the census data on population, which the Commission could use. Retrospectively, I find there are a couple of serious issues. In our visit to all the 28 states, one of their complaints was that they have little or no fiscal autonomy left. This is because most of the state taxes have been integrated with the GST through subsumed sovereignty, no doubt with their fullest consent and concurrence. This leaves the state with only some areas which are outside the purview of the GST, namely power, liquor, state duty, and property tax. The GST Council is a continuing entity. The Finance Commission is not. The relationship between the two remains an exceedingly tenuous one. Hence, states' own sources of revenue are subsumed in an entity of which they are undoubtedly a member, but many complained that they have only one vote, which is what the basic principle of the GST Council rightly stipulates. In the light of this, most states pleaded for a more permanent institutional mechanism for a robust consultative process. States also need an entity which can do course correction. If the award which were made by the finance commissions are misaligned with subsequent economic developments, which are usually accepted by the central government, then these can either become a bonus or a handicap for the states for a reasonable length of time. These awards can be further complicated by the ongoing deliberations of the GST Council. This is an area where more thought needs to be given than has been done so far. The rise of China today has taken the world by surprise. Since then, our relations with the United States and Japan have become dramatically strengthened, both of whom are now strategic partners and important economic trade partners. All this has culminated in the emergence of Quad, the Quadlateral Security Dialogue, a loose grouping of US, Japan, Australia, and India, a group of like-minded countries who share common values and aspirations. If we therefore look at the altered geopolitical dynamics that exist today, we routinely now say that if our defense forces must prepare for 2.5 theaters of war in the East and in the West, and the half being the other non-conventional types of war like cyber, technology, and space. The synergy between security and development is inescapable. No country can develop without security, and no security is possible without development. All investment decisions, domestic and foreign, weigh risks, consequences of risks, and depend on the preparedness of nations to mitigate these risks. Investors must be assured that their investment destination is safe. Security is central to our development. One issue that we must address, therefore, is the reprioritization of defense expenditure, which today stands at just 2.1% of the GDP. Defense expenditure over time has been characterized by a higher share of revenue expenditure, huge pension bills, lower capital expenditure with high dependence on import or defense equipment. It has become imperative to review the structure of defense expenditure in order to ensure greater predictability and stability in the devolution of funds. The initiatives taken by the present government are in many ways commendable. Consider the fact that Prime Minister Modi took the initiative for a solar alliance in which he nationally committed a target of reducing emissions by 33 to 35% by 2030. This is in addition to his recent speech on Independence Day, in which climate was given an importance with the setting up of a national hydrogen mission as an important signal for renewable energy, making our largest employer and the largest public sector undertakings, namely the Ministry of Railways, a net zero one has more than symbolic value. But as we move forward, each one of these require very detailed work. Let us say on the transition from a coal economy towards solar and wind, hydrogen, leaving aside the issue of small nuclear plants. We know that fossil fuel will continue to be our dominant energy for some time, even though renewable energies have become increasingly more cost efficient. Moving away from fossil fuel has multiple issues. Which coal mines are we to close? Which are we to phase off? And what does one do with these stranded assets? Moving away to renewable energy would also bring about issues of people who are displaced in the process, their thoughts of livelihood, the new employment patterns, and when we consider the fact that the bulk of these coal mines are located in the poorest parts of this country. Alternative employment patterns we need to work out.
Market regulator SEBI has proposed that from 2022, the settlement cycle will be T+1 rather than T+2, which it is today. The reason is that this will allow the settlement to happen within 1 day of the transaction rather than the 2 days that it takes today. Here's a primer on all the settlement cycles that we see in the markets today.
A settlement cycle for markets is a calendar by which the actual transfer of shares between buyers and sellers is completed after any trade. For instance, under the existing practice of T+2 settlement cycle, trades executed on day 1, say Monday, need to be settled by T+2, that would be Wednesday, excluding market holidays. In case there is a market holiday in the T+2 cycle, the settlement gets extended accordingly. Now what will happen in a T+1 settlement cycle? Trades executed on day 1, say today, will have to be settled on the next day, that would be tomorrow. Assuming that you executed a buy or a sell order on Wednesday, your trade could be settled on Thursday, provided all stakeholders agree and adopt the T+1 settlement cycle. In short, this will enable a faster transfer of shares and money between buyers and sellers. This part was simple. Now let's understand the obligations for buyers and sellers under a trading settlement cycle. Now that we know about the trading cycle, let's understand the advantages and disadvantages of a shorter trading cycle. So, broadly speaking, a shorter settlement cycle would seem beneficial for the overall market, barring some operational challenges for select participants. Now, let's take a look at what SEBI has proposed for Indian markets. Well, that's all about market settlement cycle. But before we sign off, here's an interesting bit of information. At present, China is the only market of significant size and scale that operates on a shortened settlement cycle.
Well, that's all we have in this edition of the Business Standard Morning Show. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with more news and analysis in another episode very soon. Stay tuned.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.